Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Beautiful day in paradise here in the Silicon Valley. And we are extremely excited to have all of you here to have this next few days, and for many of you yesterday, to really come together and talk about so many of these critical issues and very exciting opportunities that are staring us in the face. The theme, of course, is technology meets sustainability. And to kick things off, really happy to have a good friend of ours, someone who's, I think, well known to this community, who really is, whose company and he personally is really showing the way of how, what the opportunities are, where we can leverage technology to solve some of the great challenges. So please welcome, let's see how we go here. Janet will be here shortly. She's stuck in traffic. So please welcome the Chief Environmental and City Strategist for Microsoft, Rob Bernard.
Thanks, Joel. Good morning, everybody. So as Joel said, I am the Chief Environmental Strategist for Microsoft. And what that means is I think about how do we empower every person and every organization on the planet to leverage technology to create a sustainable planet. And with the news that's happening today, that's quite a challenge. So these are headlines that I suspect and expect that most of you have seen. Right? We just came off the 2 consecutive hottest months, basically since we've been tracking. We are seeing the oceans absorbing massive amounts of heat. And there's some indication now that the speed at which the oceans can absorb heat will now decrease as a result of what you see on the maps here. And that means, of course, that the air will increase its heat much more rapidly, and so we'll see even more exaggerated records in our heat. And at the same time as the oceans are heating up, we're seeing basically drying of massive lakes around the world, water systems collapsing, aquifers drying up. And so this is a pretty intimidating set of circumstances, and it's easy to get discouraged. I've been doing this job for quite a while, and for a long time we've been talking about the promise of technology and what it can do. Right? But the difference is we have now arrived at the point where the technology is here. Right? And so I'm going to share with you a couple of examples of places in which technology is being transformative. And I think if there's nothing else you take away from this session, I want you to think about what does this mean for you in your role? How can you take this back to your company or to the thing that you're passionate about and transform the way that you use resources on a worldwide basis? So I'm just going to, can we have the, we'll come to this in just a second. So in the face of these sort of big challenges, I think what we're seeing is a change in the way technology is going to drive a transformation of every kind of resource we use. So in this case, there's a book, I don't know how many people have seen this, called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. There's another book, Future by Al Gore. There's another one called Resource Revolution. And the general premise is that IT is going to enable a new wave of transformation in every single thing we do. So how many people came here by Uber instead of taxi? Right? And how many people do Airbnb potentially when they go on vacation instead of just going to hotels, right? So these are disruptive things that we're all familiar with, but it's happening everywhere. 3D printing, it's happening in human genome work, it's happening in IoT and digital transformation, and business models are changing everywhere all at once. And so how do we apply those transformations in areas that we're more familiar with, like an Airbnb or Uber, to the natural environment and to sustainability broadly? So I wanted to share one example from our home up in Puget Sound, outside of Seattle.
When we first built our hatchery in 1989, and for 15 years thereafter, we successfully grew larvae, billions of larvae every year, without having to monitor the seawater. And it was around 2008 or so that the failures happened more regularly than the successes, and this whole issue came into focus for us.
I first heard about ocean acidification from some other scientists. I didn't think much of it, but then it became clear, especially through some news stories, that it was a big deal for local shellfish growers. They're very worried about the future of their industry. These are family businesses that have been going on for many generations, and the youngest generation can see that maybe there won't be an oyster industry for their children to inherit. They started having real problems growing the baby oysters there. They've discovered that the reason was because of the acidification of the waters coming in from the Pacific.
It's taken technology to help find our way around this problem and manage this problem.
A big part of the science I do has to do with the flow of water in estuaries, which is the place where the oysters grow. And so realizing that the processes that we were studying and simulating on the coast actually were right now affecting these organisms in a really obvious and clear way.
Having the model to predict and tell us what the chemistry is in those bays and inlets, to tell us if the conditions are right or not to set those baby oysters is really valuable.
Azure and cloud computing in general is transforming my ability to do this work. Now, using the live ocean system, shellfish farmers can plan for when they're going to put out larval oysters and adapt to upcoming ocean acidification events. The thing that I'm most excited about in the future is really allowing all the people who live around Puget Sound and the coast here to give them a way of visually interacting with what the water's doing that they can't see underneath the water just from a boat, but that we can see in the computer models.
Now that we have these tools, we have forecasting tools and we have monitoring tools, and we're producing larvae successfully again, I feel optimistic.
So that's just one example of an industry which obviously is important to us in the Pacific Northwest, where the reality of climate change and ocean acidification would have decimated their business. But with cloud computing and a change in the way that they're managing their business through data, they're continuing to thrive. Now, of course, the next level is it's not just about big businesses, right? It's about us, our families, and our own exploration of our environment. This is actually across the street from where I live. My kids go out and sort of explore. And so while the data is helpful and important for us in terms of managing our businesses, we also need to think about how we're going to do a much better job of understanding what is causing not just the acidification, but also the die-off that we're seeing in lots of the bodies of water around the world. And I'm confident that the use of technologies and data will help us with this problem as well. So not only is it about what can the data do, but as we built out this new infrastructure for the fourth industrial revolution, which is basically using cloud and information to transform the way we use every resource, we've got to think about how do we power these massive data centers. To give you some context, at Microsoft, these data centers use as much energy as a small state. So today, Microsoft literally consumes as much energy as a state like Alaska or Idaho or Vermont or many other states. And within a decade or two, it's not unfathomable that we will be using as much energy as countries. So then the issue for us is, well, if all these countries around the world are committing to energy goals, targets, climate goals, targets, carbon goals, and targets, why wouldn't we, when we think about powering this infrastructure of the future? How do we think about investing in batteries that don't use lead acid and have all the same problems that we've had for the last few generations? And so for us, as we're building out this infrastructure, and these are several dozen buildings all over the world that power the internet and the cloud, we're thinking about what is our role in operating and driving a transformation. And so how do we think about being more transparent in our own business models? How do we drive a new clean energy infrastructure? And how do we accelerate research? So about 4 or 5 months ago, we actually came out and we said, look, we've already been carbon neutral. I suspect many of you know this. We're carbon neutral in all of our operations, but we're actually going to improve our energy mix. So today, about 44% of our energy comes from wind, hydro, and solar, which means about 55% comes from fossil fuel-based energy. So as we grow this infrastructure and we dramatically increase our energy use, we're actually going to increase our percentage as well. So we've committed to actually have a 50% energy goal from water, wind, and hydro and solar within the next year or two. And by the turn of the next decade, by the early 2020, that number will go to 60%, and we'll keep growing from there. We're also going to maintain our carbon neutrality. We're going to retire all the green attributes, because one of the key things is it is possible to actually invest in green energy without actually retiring the attributes, in which case you're not adding to the grid. We're going to invest in new energy technologies, and we're going to support public policies like we did with the Clean Power Plan, along with some of our colleagues. So as we continue to invest in these different carbon offset projects around the world, we really need to take a step back and say, look, we've been doing this for 3 years. How do we take technology like we're doing with the oysters in Puget Sound and apply this to projects around the world like this in Africa? Right? So one of the things that we're doing with a company called MCOPA is saying, what if you actually took the power of cloud computing, the carbon offset models that a company like Microsoft and others have, and you think about transforming the way people get energy in developing nations on the back of IT. And so what this model basically says is, if you take the same amount of money that you're using in a village today to pay for kerosene and wood to basically light your homes and cook, and you directed that instead towards these solar-based charging stations, what would happen? And here's what tends to happen. First of all, the adoption is viral. So this company is now up to 500,000 households. They're adding over 500 new households a day. They've employed over 1,000 people, and this is a company that's only been in business for a few years, and you can see in just 5 years what their growth curve looks like. And so what they do is they actually embed sensors in every single one of these solar panels around their communities, and they can see what's happening. So the president shared a story with me where they actually looked and they saw that, they can see when the power is actually degrading in these units before the users see it, and they can send out technicians to fix them. And one of the people in the field called and was irate and said, hey, look, your system doesn't work because every single day by the end of the day, I am out of power. Well, they went and they looked at the data, and what they actually found is they asked them some questions. They said, well, where were you yesterday around 1 o'clock? Where were you the day before at 3 o'clock? Where were you the day before at 2? Turns out he was out running errands. And while he was out running errands, all of his employees would rush in, charge their units on the solar power and the battery. And he was convinced that it was the battery problem, and actually it turns out that now that's a new employee benefit for everybody in his company, which is come to work, charge your batteries. And so this is all based on data and thinking about how do you transform every single aspect. And so just in a few minutes that I've had here, I sort of want to say, look, we've got natural ecosystems problems. We've got opportunities to change it, like we've done with the shellfish work. We've got energy challenges as we build out the new infrastructure. So we have to do that in a way that is responsible and committed to actually improving the energy mix. Yet we're just at the cusp of what needs to happen. So I really want to encourage each of you, if you don't remember anything else, like I said, is think about how do you broaden your approach and the tools that you have to attack these issues, because we are absolutely at the cusp of a transformation. While we see the transformation, unfortunately, happening on our planet, I am very excited about the transformation and the stuff you're going to see here at VERGE over the next few days. We have the opportunity to change the way we use resources, and I'm excited to be part of this journey and transformation with you. Thank you.